why can Japanese people not speak English? Or why are you not able to learn Japanese that easily? Basically, those are two different questions, but I came down to the same answer. So in this video, I want to talk about some reasons, and of course there will be many, but I will pick out some reasons why Japanese people don't speak English and why it's so hard for them to learn English. So if you look at the English Proficiency Index, you can see that Japan is on place 87 out of 113 countries with their English proficiency. And not just this, they're constantly getting a lower rank every year. So even not their performance is just bad, it's even getting worse. So you can ask the question, why is Japanese people English that bad? Or you can also ask the question, why is it so hard to learn Japanese? And wait, you will think those are two different questions, but I can tell you they have the same answer at the end. So let me give you this answer in 3 steps in this video. Hey, I'm Victor. I'm called Seikai Insight on my social media channels, and even though I'm talking English right now, I'm actually German. So I learned English and I also learned Japanese, and for me personally, it was much easier to learn English than learning Japanese. So in this video, I want to talk about 3 points why it's maybe hard for Japanese people to speak English. Well, my first point will be that English and Japanese is actually the two most difficult combinations of languages. They're really different in their base. So in my second point, I will talk about some like grammatical things or sentence structures that are really different in English and in Japanese. And in my third point, I will talk about some cultural differences, because of course your culture and the way how you think and act in a society reflects also inside your language. And Japan and America are really different, so let me give you a small insight into this topic. And at the end, I will give a small conclusion. So let's get right into this topic. So English and Japanese are the two most difficult combinations you could take. And this means basically, I will assume that you're a native English speaker for this example now. So a native English speaker, if you want to learn French, for example, you need about 600 hours to study the language to reach a level where you can work, like a working proficiency level. Japanese language, for example, needs 2,200 hours. And that's some data I found on the internet, but to be really honest to you, while researching about the Japanese institution, they even say that you need 3,000 hours to be able to have fluent Japanese proficiency. And I can tell you that usually what I experience with people that learn Japanese, they need at least 3 years usually to reach the N2 level or to reach above the N2 level. And the N2 level, if it doesn't make sense to you, there's a language proficiency test that you can take. And basically the levels go from N1 to N5. And to be able to work, you need at least N2, and mostly you need N1, that is the highest proficiency. And to reach N2, and let's say a bit above, because you need to be between N2 and N1, you need to study around 3 years. Because that's what I experienced, how long usually people around me take to reach the N2 level. And 3 years of study for about 3 hours every day. So let's just calculate this for a moment. If you take 365 days and you multiply it times 3, you come to around 1,000 hours, let's say, roundabout. So if you take this for 3 years, you need 3,000 hours, not just the 2,200 hours I told you in the beginning. And at this point you will maybe ask, yeah, but Victor, like basically it's just a language. You learn the vocabulary, you learn the alphabet maybe, then you learn the grammar, and that's basically it, right? So why is there such a big difference with 3,000 hours you need to learn to speak English and 600 hours for French? So let's get right into my second point and into some grammatical differences between Japanese language and English language. Okay, I will start this section with some example. So for example, if I speak English, let's say we both have a conversation and I just say eat. That's not a real sentence, right? I mean, my English is not perfect too, but usually when you speak English, for example, you need to have some kind of, let's say, word that indicates who is doing something. So in this point, I need to say I eat, or I want to eat, or I will eat, whatever you want to say. But for example, if you take Japanese language, you can just say taberu. And this basically, if you translate it, it just means to eat. And it makes perfectly sense. Japanese people use it often. So just by this small example, you can see that in Japanese language, you can just use the verb and already create a sentence, while English language, for example, needs a subject in this case. And that's also another difference between English and Japanese language, because the order inside the sentence is different. So, for example, Japanese language has a SOV structure, but the English language has a SVO structure. So while you can say in English, for example, Cindy ate cereal, so you have a subject, Cindy, a verb, ate, and cereal, an object, that is not the thing in Japanese language. So for example, in Japanese, you would always say something like, Cindy ga cereal o tabemashita. So in this case, you always have the, let's say, structure of subject, Cindy, and then an object, so SO, in this case, cereal, and then tabemashita, so ate, and in this case, this would be the verb. So the verb in Japanese language is also always at the end of the sentence. And it's not just about omitting the subject or, let's say, a different structure inside the sentence. Also, what I recognize personally when learning Japanese for 4 years already now, Japanese language always has the most important point at the back of the sentence. So you can basically imagine Japanese language like a train structure. If you want to, by the way, know more about like the train structure or more grammatical things about Japanese language, I also made a workbook that I will link you down in the video. But for this, I will give you a brief explanation. So basically, Japanese language is like a train. Like you have the front of the train that actually drives, and then you put wagons behind it, right? And the front of the train is actually at the back of the sentence in Japanese, so in other words, it's the verb. Like I explained to you in the beginning, even without wagons, the front of the train can just drive, right? So you can just have taberu. And then basically in Japanese language, you put the other information behind there. And the more farther it gets from our main train, the more irrelevant the information gets. And that's a thing that really, really confused me when I started learning English. Not English, Japanese. Because just imagine about this. It's not just about a different structure in the language, it's a really whole thinking process. So for example, in German, it's the same as in English, I can start my sentence while I think. So I can just start the main sentence and the main point that I want to say, and then I gradually add some information that this may be interesting. But for example, if I talk in Japanese, I cannot just start my sentence. Because before I even start my sentence, I need to know what the main point of my sentence will be. So this makes a really, really whole different thinking process in Japanese language. And now we also come to my third point, because of course there are not just the grammatical issues and the thinking issues. Now I want to give you a kind of, let's say, insight, Sekai insight, into some thinking processes that are maybe not usually seen in, let's say, America or England, for example. And in this case, I will kind of compare it to the German culture a bit too. So basically, I have just 5 sentences or occasions I gathered randomly to kind of give you a more, let's say, diverse insight into the Japanese language. So first, I will start by explaining you a situation that I experienced in Japan. And this was when I went to an onsen, you know, like the hot springs where you just chill around in the hot water and can relax. It's kind of the, let's say, the Japanese version of a sauna, let's say. And I went there, and I usually went there alone just to calm down a bit after I did some Japanese learning or I made some videos for YouTube. And on that day, I was inside the onsen, and usually you're there inside with other Japanese people. So I don't know, at that time there were around 10 or 15 people inside me. I know it's not a good thing to do that, but of course, if you hear people talking around you, you kind of listen to their topics. So there was a group of like Japanese people, and they were around the age of students, so similar to my age. And they went to the onsen and just had some talk. And basically everyone started talking, and they had some conversations and blah blah. And then all of a sudden it went really silent. No one said anything. And then one person just said, "Samui ne." And then I went inside. And if you don't know Japanese that well, "Samui ne" means something like, yeah, well, it's pretty cold, or it's cold. And basically this was an, let's say, a way of saying, we should go inside, I don't want to stay inside the onsen. And I don't know, maybe in this case I'm kind of German. But for example, in Germany, people are really, really direct. And of course, there are many reasons, but one reason is also because Germany is right now, and also kind of historically was always kind of mixed with different kind of cultures. For example, Japan is an island. You cannot mix cultures that easily, and you have many high mountains, which makes it hard to even mix cultures inside Japan, because it's hard to get to another city. But Germany, for example, is pretty flat, so you can go really easily from one to the other place. And also, I mean, you have so many countries around Germany. I mean, that's a good thing to get some vacations. And in other words, that makes Germany more cultural different. And if you have different cultures, you need to be more direct than maybe a Japanese person, because it's harder to understand other cultures. So, for example, in Germany, when you want to say that you just want to get outside, you will usually just say that you want to get outside. So, for example, say, yeah, it's kind of hot, let's go inside. Of course, there are some situations where you don't know the people that much, so you want to be more polite. In this case, in Germany, then you would say something more like, yeah, um, I'm kind of getting hot, so maybe I will take a look inside. But you will still kind of say that you're hot and you want to go inside. And that's no problem in Germany. And I don't know, in Japanese language, not just with this samuine, but there are many, let's say, indirect ways of giving information to a person. So, for example, if someone learns German, you can just be really direct and everyone will understand you. And in the most cases, it will not even be, let's say, considered rude. But in Japanese language, you don't want to be too direct, because being direct means you're being rude. So that's why you really try to kind of talk around things, or in a more mild or distant way, to indicate what you actually want to say. And that makes it, even in my opinion, even harder to learn Japanese, because it's not just about learning the language, the vocabulary, the grammar. Even if you understand everything perfectly, if you don't understand the, let's say, cultural norms, or the way of saying something, or say how the Japanese like to say something, like kuki o yomu koto, so in this case to read the air, then you're kind of fucked up, to be honest. So that's another component that, of course, is important for many cultures. But let's say if a German person learns English, or if an English person learns German, there's not that much cultural difference than compared to Japan. And that's something that makes it even harder to learn English as a Japanese person, because you also have to learn the cultural differences, let's say. And in other words, and that's why I said in the beginning, it's the same answer for a different question. That's why it's so hard for you to learn Japanese. And to add to this kind of topic, there's also a sentence in Japanese language. It's kind of one of my favorite sentences, so I want to put it inside here. It's called Neko no te mo karitai. And it basically, if you translate it like this, it means something like, I also want to borrow cat hands. And maybe you can tell me what this means. Yeah, I would have guessed so. If you're not that experienced with Japanese language, then of course you will not know what it means. I didn't either know what it means when I went to Japan, but it basically means, yeah, you're so busy that you need a cat to help you with your stuff. So that's why you need cat hands. I don't know, I kind of like that sentence, but that also shows you kind of that some expressions you will not really understand if you don't have a Japanese person really explaining this to you. And that is not just a thing for German, in my case, learning Japanese, also the other way around. And two more cultural things, because I don't know, you know that I'm kind of into culture, and I also research about culture and stuff with my bachelor thesis, so that's why I like to talk about it, and I think it's interesting for you too. But anyway, two more things I want to talk about, and that's also the thing with opinions in Japanese and feelings. And maybe you can tell me how it's in your country. But one thing I really recognized often in Japan, and I don't want to say that one thing is bad or the other is good, I just want to tell you the difference, and then you can say yourself which one you like and which one you don't like. But basically, what I, um, let's say, sensed in Japan is that many people don't have opinions about a certain topic. So, for example, in Germany, basically everyone has some general opinion about every topic. So let's say about LGBTQ plus, or being vegan, or eating meat, or a certain party. Everyone always has kind of something to say or what he thinks about a certain topic. And what I really had often in Japan, that when you ask people a more, let's say, difficult question, difficult in case of, let's say, political or historical, then often you get an answer like, まあ、あまりわからないね. So something like, yeah, I don't know about this. And of course, this can also mean like that the person tries to avoid giving you an answer. But in many occasions, I also found out that the people really don't think about these topics because they're not interesting to them. And that's also a thing you need to get used to. And maybe for a Japanese person, let's say, that is not used to talk about that many deep or historical or political topics, for them it can maybe be a bit scary to learn English, for example, because that also means to interact with people from America or England or Germany that really talk about politics and historical things often. And I think many Japanese people try to kind of avoid this bubble because it's different to them, and also it's kind of, let's say, cultural too different to get used to it.